I don't want to call him a fortune teller. Advice here, because he talked about this so much about Parliament and it came to pass. So I don't want to give him that name, but maybe I can baptize him. All right, Advice, are we likely to see a repeat of what happened in Parliament this week?
We're not likely to see a repeat. We will see a repeat of what happened.
There you go again. There you go again. We'll be here next week on Monday.
No. It is just about being realistic with our politics. And there is a very big divide between what politicians will speak to in funerals, in the media, on the floor of the House, and the decisions that they will actually take when it comes to political processes. What is happening now is a political process. Political processes are not necessarily about the independence of the thought and the mind of politicians. The decisions have come from some headquarters and they must be whipped that direction. As it stands today, both in the Senate, the National Assembly, and the County Assembly, when you put together the President of the Republic, together with the opposition leader of a republic, then you definitely have the numbers. It is very difficult for anyone to wrestle out with those numbers when those two people come together. The only way when something becomes 50-50 is when we have the president on one side and the opposition on the other side. But when the two are working together, you would then wonder, who is this third force? You see, there was a trial by the Linda Katiba movement to try and also wrestle out and provide another alternative voice to the BBI. But you saw how far it went. It went just as far as the two press conferences. And it didn't go beyond that. And that is the reality of our politics, because it talks about resources. For Linda Katiba to be able to even be able to come to voice properly, they need adequate resources. These are things they do not have. So when you put together government and opposition, maybe you would tell me who would be strong enough to fight that bandwagon. It is difficult. So in the Senate, what is going to happen is, one thing you expect is we are going to have very good presentations, because we have a lot of very brilliant minds in the Senate. I've insisted on Senator Wetangula, a very brilliant mind who is there. We have Senator Sakaja, we have Mutula Kilonzo Jr. So if anything wants to learn some English and also learn about some law, you would watch that proceeding. It will be a very interesting proceeding to watch. But when it comes to the voting after that proceeding, it will be nothing about what they said. It will be everything about political interests.
Absolutely. And of course, it will also be interesting to see how Senator James Orengo will vote and Senator Okongo Mogeni will also vote, having in mind that they have got some kind of frosty relationship with ODM leader Odinga, Raila Odinga, as we speak. I think that is the right time to bring to an end this particular debate, and just to remind you that KCSE results will be announced today anytime from 11 a.m. or noon thereabout by the CS for Education, that is Professor George Magoha at Mtihani House, and that will be brought to you live here on KBC Channel 1. To all the candidates who sat for their KCSE examination, we wish you all the best, even as you receive your examination. And to those traveling back to school, have a safe journey and just do your best, because remember, the world depends on you. Gentlemen, thank you so much. In studio I was with Advice Mundalo, who is communication expert, and Hamisi Boga, who joined me via Zoom, all the way from Mombasa, who is a political analyst and governance expert. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us every Monday. Let's do this again next week, God willing. Bye-bye for now, and take care of yourself. Bye-bye.
The advent of the novel coronavirus pandemic globally has seen different measures put in place to mitigate the spread of the virus. With this, there has been an exponential increase in the use of face masks for protecting oneself against the virus. Among the people who have been using this mask despite them being a barrier in their communication is the deaf and hard of hearing. According to World Health Organization, WHO, hearing loss may result from genetic causes, complications at birth, certain infectious diseases, exposure to excessive noise, and aging. In Kenya, as stated by the Kenya National Population Census 2019, there are 918,270 deaf people in Kenya aged above 5 years. This is a significant number that cannot be ignored, and therefore we went out to meet and interact with this community to find out exactly how their lives have been impacted and how they're managing since the pandemic, as most of them rely on lip reading to communicate, yet they must wear masks. Abdon Nestor and his wife Elizabeth Agot live in Umoja Estate in Nairobi with their 3 hearing children, and through our sign language interpreter Stacey Dorcas, they talk to us about how challenging it has been since the onset of the COVID-19, especially in communicating with other people. We ask him if wearing of blocked masks affects communication among the deaf community, and this is what he had to say.
So it does affect, especially wearing of masks, because when you wear the mask, it blocks the mouth, and that's, if you're communicating with a hearing person, you are unable to see what they're saying, because that person does not know sign language. So that's how it blocks communication.
And on learning in schools for deaf children, this is what Abdon has to say.
So with learning, for deaf children, it's really good. For hearing children, it will be simple. Even if the teacher has a mask on, at least they can hear. But for deaf children, it's hard because they won't lip read. So if the teacher, for example, is writing on chalkboard, then how will the deaf children get to understand what the teacher is saying? If at all the teacher is showing the back. So that's why it's very important for the teacher, while using sign language, you have to have face contact, eye contact, so that even if the teacher will miss a sign, but the teacher will show it through the lips, then the children will understand.
Our next stop is Kariobangi South Estate in Nairobi. Here we meet Maureen Wayego, a mother of 2, Ann Njoki, who is 9 years old and is deaf. Her son Wilfred Kimani is 6 years old, but he can hear. She talks to us on some of the challenges a deaf child can go through and how the transparent masks have been like a savior to her daughter Ann.
Anita, nilijuanga nilinotisingi mtoto after 1 year to 2, akielekea 2 years hivi, nikiweka loudspeaker aski, nikiweka hata TV hivi mtoto amki, nikimuita itiki, nikateka action, nikampeleka akiwa na 2 years sasa usi. Kwenda huko usi akapimwa hizo vitu zote, akaonekana ni deaf. During this corona ni shida communicate na mtu huyu, ama akiwa na hizo mask zingine ni shida tupu. Unapata mtoto anaangalianga lips venye unaanza venye unaongea ndio ajue venye ndio shikanishe. Akiwa hizo zingine itabidi ana struggle, but akiwa na hii unajua venye mta communicate na yeye na tuna go through. Hizi mask zinasaidia kuliko zile zingine, na sijui tunaweza zitoa wapi, na si watoto wengi wako na hizi mask, na watu ni wengi sana.
Jenny 3
na bahati akaona hii. Yeye hana shida ya kushinda akitoa akicommunicate. Wale wengine unapata anatoa ndio. Unajua kitu ya first of all ujue mwingine na mwingine huwezi jua mwenye kona corona. Unaona? Unapata anashika hapa anajiguza yeye mwenyewe. Unashindwa mtu anatoa wapi ugonjwa, lakini ni ile kushikashika. But akiwa na hii, akiwa ameweka atashinda kitu ama kijiguza.
Our search for benefits of these transparent masks takes us to Homa Bay County, where we meet another parent whose daughter A deaf child has benefited, especially in school, from using the transparent masks. This is Triza Amambo, also a mother of 2 children, Blessing Waka, a 9-year-old girl who was born deaf, and her sister Precious Amunga, who is not deaf. Triza did not know Blessing was deaf until she was 6 months old. According to her, it has been a tough journey with her firstborn child, especially in communicating with other people during the COVID-19 pandemic that now forces everyone to wear face masks for protection. Her consolation came when a friend introduced her to the transparent masks.
Na nilinotice Blessing ni deaf akikuwa na miezi 6. Juu daktari ndienda kwa daktari akaniambia mtoto ni deaf na itabidi ukubali ni deaf. So akaniambia ningoje ikifika miaka 5 niende waniandikie barua kumpeleka shule. So nikaenda St. Anne's wakanipea barua nikampeleka shule. Kumpeleka shule nikaona at least ameanza kuimprove. Nimeona improvement sana kwa mtoi. Then hii wakati wa corona nimeona pia improvement, especially vile hizi mask zilikuja. Hizi mask vile zilikuja zimeleta improvement kwa Blessing juu communicate na watu, hata shule na communicate na teacher. Pia teacher ameniambia kuna improvement sana. In fact, kwa hiyo shule wanahitaji hizi mask sana.
Triza further explains how the transparent masks have been improving her daughter's life day to day, especially in school, compared to the blocked masks.
Zile blocked mask, Blessing as in watoto deaf, hata ungewaongelesha wakajua ni nini unaongea juu. Most of them wana lip read. Kiwaambia kitu naambia sign language but ukilip read. Kama cap wanaangalia mdomo cap. So hii vile ilikuja at least iliwasaidia. Juu ukimwambia cap wewe pia umevaa hii na yeye amevaa hii, inamsaidia sana.
It is clear that from some people of the deaf community that we spoke to, it is a double tragedy for them. The COVID-19 pandemic and lack of proper masks for their communication has been a big issue. Charles Okello, the founder and director at the Kenya Christian School for the Deaf at the heart of Umoja in Nairobi, saw the need amongst the deaf and hard of hearing community and came up with a solution. Special masks for the deaf. Masks that have plastic inlay around the mouth area that make communication through the lip reading easy.
Because you see, the deaf, for you to be able to communicate with them, they need to see the facial expression. If you are happy or you are unhappy, the deaf can send through facial expression. So, and they have the lip reading. So the blocked face mask was avoiding them from communication. So we realized that we need to come up with something which will enable deaf and the hard of hearing to communicate. So we come up with this clear face mask that enable them to express themselves, because not everybody speaks sign language, but if you happen to meet a deaf, whether you are skilled in sign language or not, they will be able to read your lips and get to understand what you are saying.
According to Charles, over 3,000 clear masks have been given to the deaf both in Nairobi and Homa Bay counties, which is the headquarters of the organization, for free. However, to audiologists, they are sold at a retail price of 200 shillings so that they can make some money to be able to make more masks and distribute them to other parts of the country, which remains a challenge.
Nikivai mask hivi, unajua venye nasema, unaweza read my lips.
For special feature on the deaf, I am Sally Limo.
Welcome back. We are glad that you are still with us. In case you are just joining us, karibu sana to the program. This is Good Morning Kenya. I am Jane Mumbai. We are glad that you have chosen to be with us. Remember, you can always talk to us. Let us know where you're watching us from using the hashtag Good Morning Kenya on Twitter. My handle is Jane Mumbai across all the socials. My colleagues at Victor Olo and at Rima Nyara is how you can also find them across the socials. Now, from that particular feature, we want to just connect it to this conversation that we are about to have on our Family Check segment, and this is in regards to our children reporting back to school. Between today and tomorrow, most schools will be opening, and this is the second term, or rather the third term for this academic calendar year that they are in. And looking at how things were when our kids are going back to school in January, it was chaotic. So many parents were caught flat-footed in as much as our children were home for almost 10 months. COVID-19 just distorted and disrupted things all over the place. Now, here we are. Our kids are opening school between today and tomorrow. And as per the government directives, all children are expected to report back to school. In January, we did see a huge number of our children fail to report back to schools due to conversations around teen pregnancy. We also had most of the boys who dropped out of school as a result of financial constraints. Now, here we are again about to take our children back to school. Will we be seeing the same situation? And if so, what do we need to do as parents, as stakeholders across the value chain in line with adhering to the COVID-19 protocols and making sure that we are protecting our children and protecting them full circle? Helping me with this conversation today, I am joined by Achayo Baraka here in studio. She is an advocate of the High Court. She's also the founder of Legal Sisters, which is an organization that advocates for children's rights. And she's also a part-time teacher. Good morning, Achayo.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for making time to be with us today.
Thank you.
Maybe we could start with your social media handles so that our viewers can also interact with you.
Good morning, Kenya. On this other side of the studio is Miss Achayo Baraka. You'll find me at Achayo Baraka on Instagram, Twitter, Achayo Baraka, and of course on YouTube, where I try to educate you about your access to justice, Achayo Baraka. Thank you.
There you have it. Thank you so much. And of course, a bit later, in not too long rather, we're going to also be joined by Fred Aborg via Zoom, who is a mentor, motivational speaker, as well as a psychologist. Now, just getting straight into this conversation, from a legal standing, the government says that every child must report back to school. Is the government within its rights to demand this of all children across the country? Once again, this is Class 101, so we are here to take note and learn. So maybe we could start from that point.
Thank you so much. So basically, in every state, there's something called a social contract that we enter into as citizens and with the government of Kenya, with the government, whichever country you're coming from, in this case being the government of Kenya.
Yes.
So it's under an obligation to make sure that there are rights that we cannot protect ourselves from, only with the help, but only with the help of the government can we do that. So that means things such as rights of children. You know, it's not easy. It takes it's a whole societal effort, both the parents, both the teachers, and also including now the government.
Yes.
So in one answer, I will say yes, they are within their right to make sure that they proclaim students go back to school, because under the Constitution, Article 53, there are children rights that have been stipulated there.
Yes.
One of them being your right to education. Yeah.
So government is within its rights to demand this, and of course during this space that we are, free primary and secondary education. But now, on the other hand, we have the parents.
Yeah.
Again, I like the way you've put it. We enter into this contract with the government and whatever parties may be involved. We have the parents, and for most parents, or rather for those who are finding it a bit hard, are basing their situation on the prevailing financial situation in the country, and arguably so, they do have a point.
True.
Due to COVID-19 happening. But to what extent can they exercise their rights as parents to not allow the kids to go back to school due to financial constraints that are involved with the children going to school?
So on one hand, there's that issue of financial constraint.
Yeah.
But remember, there's something that reigns supreme, even to you as an individual. One of them being as a parent, because most of them are the ones who have seen the effect of the children being back at home. We cannot say that parents are completely flat-footed, like you cannot just afford even the registration fee, and then the others we can talk over with school. That's when we have the government coming in and telling their teachers, hey, we've been paying you even if you have not been in school. It's time for you to also understand our parents. Step up, allow the students to come in school, because at the end of the day, it's about their education and nothing more as a government. If we don't do that, that's how we are having now other crises. Teen pregnancies, like you've talked about, our boys now not being in school, and that leads to child labor. So it's all of us coming together and understanding we are all going through this pandemic. As teachers, we are also parents somewhere else. You want another teacher to understand your child. So I believe it's about, like the way you're saying, dialogue. Let's have a conversation together.
But then again, looking at most of the schools, and especially in the private sector, I've heard so many complaints on social media from parents who are saying that schools are demanding that parents pay school fees, if not half, if not complete, at least half of it, and that, and only then is when they will allow the children to go back to school. Legally speaking, are they within their rights to demand so?
Remember, schools are still regulated as much as they are private schools. The fact that you are on the land of Kenya, we still are regulated by the government of Kenya. So the fact that as a private school wants to work within its own means and pretend like it does not exist in on this earth with other schools, then that's where we are missing the point. And that's where, as CS Magoha is saying, go back to school. It's up to him to take it up. Which are those schools? Let's have them listed. Let him now go dialogue with these teachers that it cannot be as so. If that's not the case, then the schools can as well just be closed and let our students go to other schools where education is actually affordable and accessible.
But if we're being as practical as possible, we are not at a point where we can actually exercise that. You find schools are just saying, yo, we need money to run, and we cannot take care of your children if you don't pay. And parents are saying, serikali si inasema tuwarudishe shule, so I don't have the money, and if they keep the child at home, I will suffer the consequences. So acha akuje shule na sina pesa. How then do we find a middle ground between getting money for the school to run, the parents also not violating the child's right to education, and also understanding that the government has said no child should be left at home regardless of their situation?
And that's when, forgive me to say this, but that is when we now understand as a country we have our priorities wrong. Most of the funds right now are directed to other things like the BBI politics. So at the end of the day, you come to realize that it's not even the interest of our child. The government just wants children back to school. But how are these schools going to make sure people are still feeding? Because there's lunch, there's supper, there's those in-between teas. And if as a government, as a country, we cannot see that this money that we now need should be directed towards the education or things that matter the most, education being one of them, then to me, I feel it's up to that juncture that there's just a hiccup. So it's not really for the parent or against the parent. It's about the government having its priorities right.
Having the priority right. And this also boils back down to the school. In as much as we cannot operate without finances, how then can we go about the situation? Now, from what you have seen, from what we saw last year, so many children are dropped out of school, teen pregnancies, with the advent of COVID-19, which just catalyzed the whole situation. As our kids report back to school, they were on holiday for 7 weeks. Are we likely to see a similar repetition of what we had seen when it comes to our children, some dropping out, cases of teen pregnancies, child labor and employment? Are we likely to see that happening again?
Unfortunately, I believe that is still going to be the situation. As much as we might want to deny it, because 7 weeks is also it's not a small feat. That has been like almost 2 months at home. Parents have not even been at home. The way you're saying, we need finances to take these children back to school. So parents have been up and down trying to make sure that they can get their hands on anything, just to make sure they have school fees. But as they are doing that, children have been left with their house helps, children are back in the villages, and everything and anything can happen. Remember, as we've said, we are going to have a discussion with the psychologists. These are students side, primary school students, olds who biologically, adolescent is now kicking in, and when we don't have a constant someone to make sure we are regulating them, then unfortunately I feel that is still going to be the case.
We are likely to see a repetition of the same. And this now goes back to the whole conversation around having guidance and counseling departments as being a mandatory requirement for all schools. Do you feel this should even be enshrined within the law for any school, and especially now with COVID-19, because if we are trying to be honest, we're never going to go back to the previous normal. We have to adjust to this new normal and carry it on. Having guidance and counseling departments in school to help address issues around COVID-19 and many other challenges that our kids could be going through. Do you feel it's something that all schools should be mandated to do?
Actually, if there's a school that doesn't have that department, then you are going against the TSC Act, the Teacher Service Commission Act, which actually stipulates that when we have teachers, when it's a school, there needs to be a guiding and counseling department within the school to make sure that students, we are not only focusing on results. Yes, you said KCSE results are going to be announced today,
yes,
but we also need students who are psychologically, mentally prepared for anything, and that boils down to having a guiding and counseling. So if it's not there, then it's up to the Ministry of Education to make sure such rules and regulations in conjunction with the TSC to ensure that those rules are actually adhered to. We need that department, yes.
But for those that just have it there to just show that they have it and it's not functional, because mental health became a reality, especially after this pandemic when our kids are going back to school. So many of them were reporting stress levels. You see a 5-year-old, unamwangalia unaona mtoto ako na stress, and yet they have a counseling department at school. So maybe what would be your message to schools that have counseling and guidance and counseling departments, but they are just empty shells that are not being utilized, and especially now during this COVID times that we are in?
Actually, let me take you back just a little bit.
Sure.
You find that guiding and counseling, even the teachers who are actually told to head those departments, are not people who are ready to understand the issues that children go through in their day-to-day lives. So you find there's even a mishap at that particular point, that the teachers who are you find that they're choosing the toughest teachers within the school to manage these students, and we're saying no. I believe a teacher who is heading the guiding and counseling department should also have gone through classes of sociology, psychology, apart from just being a teacher, so that there's that added advantage that cuts you across and apart from the other teachers.
Yes.
Then we just don't need one, because most of the schools, if I'm to remember, even when I was still a student, we only had one teacher. And you'll find that, again, those teachers, they're not people you can confide in. So we are talking about, is this person confidential enough? As a principal, when you find your GNC teacher, guiding and counseling teacher, coming to tell you personal stories of a student that honestly does not concern you, which you feel she should have handled, then that is not someone who should be holding that office. So we also need to have people who students trust,
yes,
people who have something else apart from just being a teacher, to make sure that the guiding and counseling is not just a puppet in the school, but are actually working for the benefit of the students.
Being professionally qualified to hold that position.
Yes.
And I like the fact that you've mentioned they go for the hardest, or the toughest, the meanest looking teacher to be the guidance and counseling. It beats the purpose, you know. It's meant to be therapy, not vita. And we'll be coming to that in a bit, but let me just involve my other guest who's joining us via Zoom, Fred Abok. Good morning, Fred. Thank you for being with us today, joining us live from Nairobi.
So much. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, there we go. So we are having a conversation around our children going back to school, and at this point we're just looking at the importance of, you know, guidance and counseling. Given you are in this field, maybe what would be your message to schools this morning that do not have guidance and counseling department, or if they do have them in school, they are just empty shells that are not being utilized, and especially during these COVID times that we are in?
Thank you so much, Jen. It's a wonderful morning to be here. What I would like actually to express is that guiding and counseling is so essential, especially due to this pandemic and the break that has actually taken place. There is an element of disorientation that has taken place in the life of young people, and you know, the disconnections need to be restructured and refocused. And so when it comes to getting back to school, guidance and counseling plays a very vital role, because this is more or less the reconnection avenue for students to get to understand themselves, get the confidence, and reaffirm themselves when it comes to matters of education. So guiding and counseling should not be just given to an idle teacher or someone who is out to, fit a position, but need to be given to someone who with an understanding and a clear mandate, who can be able to, diagnose some of the deep embedded issues in these young people, but also be able to guide them in a way that they can be able to refocus back to school. If you do not have guidance and counseling, or if whoever is not in that position is not very qualified, it's not illegal to and to find out this some of the things that you actually help the schools around, is to do them a group counseling, because after group counseling you can be able to help them on a personal counseling that they can, students can pour out themselves, because there are a lot of issues that are dealing with the families in the society that they cannot be able to comprehend and again give back to school.
All right. Now, that brings in the other aspect of privacy when it comes to counseling sessions with the children, because this could be children who are coming from an abusive home space, or from their guardians. They could be coming from an abusive space, and they are looking to confide or talk to someone, and this could be their counselor at school, but you find the same person does not respect their privacy, and they go about telling their business to maybe other fellow members of staff, or as was mentioned by our guest here, even giving examples with them to the other students. How then do we protect these children and respect their sense of privacy, and especially during these COVID times, and ensure that the counselor is actually doing what they're supposed to do and doing right by these children, in as much as their children?
Ask me.
All right. We will be back with a book in a bit. Zoom inajaribu kutuangusha lakini haitatushinda. We are still on our conversation around the dilemma around our children going back to school. Remember, today is the day that the CS had said, according to the academic calendar with the ministry, the 10th of May is when children are supposed to report back to school, between today and tomorrow for most schools at least. So how are we doing as a country, as parents, when we take our children back? How are we doing? Are we in a better position as opposed to how we were in January, given things haven't really changed? We are still journeying through these COVID times, and we're just hoping to come out the other end. But now, coming back to you, Achayo, kids were pointed out to be super spreaders. In as much as they haven't been heavily affected by COVID, they are quite the super spreaders. With our kids going back to school, and especially with this new variant that was just detected last week in Kisumu, are we likely to see another wave, and especially within our schools, of COVID?
Actually, just the way you're putting it, students are more of super spreaders as much as they're not the ones who we can say they are really suffering the consequences of COVID-19. Scientifically, it's proven around 2 to 4% of these students within a particular class will be having this disease. These are affected by the COVID-19. So it again boils down to the government. How well have we vaccinated our teachers? Have we made sure, or was it just mere talk, that teachers need to be vaccinated? These teachers are going back to school. They're the ones who are going to suffer more the effect of this disease, this virus. So the question goes back to us. It throws it back to us as adults. These are children. For some reason, they're just protected. Ask me how, I don't know. But the teachers need to be vaccinated, the support staff, and ensure the equation of how we are regulating the pandemic, just making sure people are sanitizing, the masks are on to our teachers, so that a teacher is not having one mask for an entire week.
I know, and one thing that I've noted is some schools are actually demanding that the children go to school with at least 2 masks every single day, and especially the disposable ones that are being recommended. But now let's bring in another aspect, and this is something that I did notice was quite on the rise, and this is about bullying. Now, today on the papers there was an article that indicated Kenya is among the top countries across the world where bullying is thriving, and especially in secondary schools. Now, these children who may be the ones that are bullying other children could be coming from abusive spaces, and again the whole conversation around mental health and counseling comes into play. But what role do you think this pandemic has played towards this high rate of bullying that we are seeing among the kids?
Again, I also practice criminal law, and one of the things that we try to understand when it comes to the nature of a criminal, you find most of them are affected either by nature or nurture. That boils down to maybe they were born as such, which is something that scientists are trying to dispute.
That's nature.
But, yeah.
Okay.
That's nature. That is nature.
Yeah.
So there's also the other aspect of now the environment plays a big role, and that one can be proven completely to its completion. That just like you were putting it, people who come, students who have come from homes that, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic has hit hard. They've seen their parents' domestic violence has been on the rise. They've seen their parents find. They're going back to school, and that is where they now want to ease that energy by bullying other people, trying to see how is it that they feel when they're actually being bullied. So again, just like you're saying, I've also seen it on the papers that actually in 2017, Kenya was the topmost when it came to bullying.
Imagine that.
Globally. So it's something that, again, teachers have to have their hands on, and just making sure, like you're saying, guiding, and it goes back to guiding and counseling. Let's tame these students before, by the time they're getting to 18, we now have more criminals within the criminal law when it comes to having them incarcerated.
Now, what of situations where the bullying is coming from the administration in the school? Because this is something that is also thriving, that is misguided and misplaced under discipline. You find a member of staff or the administration is constantly picking on a particular student, and for no reason whatsoever, no reasons that hold any ground. When you have such cases, how are they supposed to be handled so that we just walk that thin line between discipline and bullying, and especially from the staff, just the administration as a whole?
As a teacher, I will tell you, we are taking through the code of conduct for TSC when you are being employed as a teacher to a particular school. So when you find that the code of conduct is not being adhered to by teachers, then that is when also TSC, it shouldn't just be quick and easy to go for teachers who have defiled students, because those are the most cases that we hear about in court. What about there's really no defilement, but physical abuse impounded on a particular student? So it goes down to the principal being open enough to have these complaints registered with Teacher Service Commission, and having these teachers, just for lack of a better word, excommunicated from the teaching profession, because part of our studies as we are being taught to become teachers involves classes to deal with psychology, sociology, and if honestly you've gone through this and you still don't feel and believe that you can understand students, especially in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic, then as much as it's as evil as it is to say it as it is, but you're not fit to be a teacher. We need people with tender hearts to do this job.
All right. And also when it comes to speaking out for children who are abled differently, and especially during this COVID time, we're just from seeing a feature there of the clear masks to just help children with hearing impairment be able to continue learning as part of the community. Now, when it comes to protecting their rights, and especially within the school space, because you might not be in control as a parent of what happens within the school, but how then do we ensure that they are protected health-wise, physically, mentally, and they are not abused in any way within the school? And this also is especially for the benefit of our viewers who are watching us this morning, and they might not really understand how to come through for children who are abled differently.
Actually, persons living with disabilities, most of the time, even as we were having this conversation, you will agree that at some point we were just focusing on a normal student,
able-bodied,
everybody who is able, but forgetting there are those who are abled differently. So yes, at least for now, Kenya has moved a step further in making sure parents don't shy away from having their students in school. Now with the pandemic, a parent is now worried. If I take him to school, personally, I'm even having a problem making sure that I see how this student can be able to live throughout the pandemic. What about a teacher? But then we are saying, as we are taking them to school, teachers who educate students who are persons with disabilities, honestly, these people, just like teachers who teach places that there is havoc, or rather they get that allowance, the hardship allowance. I believe teachers who are taking up special education should also be getting an allowance to motivate them to ensure that we curb this pandemic even as we are doing our teaching jobs. All right.
Now, as we also try to embrace all children who are expected to be going back to school, and especially those that were blessed with young ones, very young, from as young as 9 cases were reported of young girls as young as 9 being mothers. Now, accommodating them, given that we have already gone through this first term of this year, we are on to the second term of this year and the final academic term in this year that they are in. What measures do you feel need to be put in place or should be worked on to make sure that they are well accommodated in this term that we are getting into?
First and foremost, I believe these students should not be boarders. Because as much as we are making sure that, yes, this is a child who needs to be in school, remember at some point she's also a mother to another child. So for us to make sure that this other child is also not neglected, I believe some of the measures is making sure that we don't really have these students in boarding schools, especially if the children are still within those 6 months. Let's allow them to have that mother-daughter bond. Teachers should also make sure that as they are preparing the program, tea break, at lunchtime, these students are allowed at least an extra hour to make sure that the breastfeeding, because it's a sad reality, but we have to deal with it as it is. Leave school early, maybe at 3. Now, also the willingness of the student. Makosa imefanyika, maji yamemwagika. Have your own time to also make sure you are reading far and beyond what other students are covering, just to make sure you are at par with everyone. So I believe making sure we accommodate them, just having that guiding and counseling still in place, because it's not easy. This is a child who is a mother studying with other children. Other children will be mocking them. So GNC still goes and boils down at our guiding and counseling departments back in school.
Absolutely. And also want to just bring you in, Abok, at this particular point, looking at how the lessons that we can learn from last term when it comes to our young girls who fell pregnant, had their children, and they're now still going back to school. As per the government directives, how can we accommodate them better during this school term from what we did learn from the past term?
Well, thank you, Jane. Before that, the element of pregnancy in school has actually been victimized, but also stereotyped to mean that someone is mischievous or, has done something that is so abominative. But of course, due to an accommodating factor that the government has put in place, I think the most essential thing is the understanding between the administration and the students who are actually the young mothers, for example, and trying to accommodate them by, just helping them to both balance their academics and taking care of their children. Now, this accommodation should be based in an understanding that it is not sickness, it is a mistake that has happened, and someone is still willing to go on with education. And the most important thing is the attitude that you are going to help the student to what they adopt a positive attitude that they can be able to go to continue their academics. Then you can help them to balance the motherhood and academics. So in this aspect, it's just like what my colleague has actually said, is to check on the timing variety, whereby kids are not going to suffer as a result of the mother going to school, but it is balanced in that both can actually be able to perform, but also raise up their children in an amicable environment. But also the other thing is the administration to try to protect these young mothers from a stereotype kind of an attitude within an environment, because if that's allowed, can be able to affect the psychological dynamics of these young girls. So by enlightening that the rest of the students that though it is a mistake that has been done, but it is not, it is not life and death. So still, someone can do a mistake, but still should be accommodated, and the rest of the students should be receptive to these students and accommodate them just as they are. And this will be able to help enlighten them to pursue what they all need to pursue in academics.
All right, and what role can the parents also play, having learned lessons from the previous term? Because, children spend most of their time school and at home. Still looking at this category of young girls who got their children at a very young age and they're now going back to school. Looking at the home space, what can the parents do better?
Great, thank you. I think I've always said in this show that when it comes to parental guidance and the elements of sex education, is very vital, and it's not just something that is supposed to be reactive, but it's supposed to be proactive, in that sexual conversation needs to take place as early as children are still very young. Number one, to help them understand themselves and also to understand how they can protect themselves. But secondly, in that when a scenario like this happens, and now you have a young mother, I think there is an element of partnership and also encouragement. Parents need to come forth and just partner with their children. If you can be able to employ a helper for this young girl, please go ahead. If you can be able to support, because the life of this young girl should not be jeopardized by the fact that they are pregnant, early pregnant. But they need to be given a platform as they are recovering so that they can be able to get their best academically. But also the other element is that parents need to protect these young girls from being vulnerable to maybe the people who have actually been involved with them sexually and also their partners, so that they don't lure them to being in more of this relationship. I think they need to guide them into understanding that though the mistake has happened, the focus must be education and raising up your child. So parents played a very vital role by the communication. Most parents tend to be reactive and be offended by this fact because they are embarrassed, but there is nothing to be embarrassed about. There is nothing to be offended about. Something has already happened, and what you need to find out is what is the solution to the quagmire that you're actually in, by making all the right moves that will help this young girl to refocus and actually be able to get the best out of the situation.
Okay, thank you so much, Obok. And as we close this conversation, I'd like to pose the same question to you, Achayo. What role can parents play from the home better when it comes to accommodating this group of young girls compared to what we did in the previous term?
CBC curriculum is here with us. Unfortunately, again, our parents don't want to really engage themselves with the work and everything that comes from school, from these young mothers, for lack of a better word, or their own children. So you find when even I, as a young one, I realize my own mother, my own father doesn't even have time for us. That is the time, instead of doing homeworks, they're running around trying to entertain anything that comes around their way. Also considering we now have YouTube. Everyone had internet installed within their homes. There's a way you can synchronize your own YouTube and TV, so that when you're at work, you actually see what is it that my students are watching, so that it's still your primary responsibility. You have your hands on, not asking your house help, what did they watch today? I mean, they'll cheat you and tell you anything. So it's about being present. That's my parting shot. Be present. Be actively present. Yes. All right. Now, we'll have to to bring this conversation to a close at that particular point. Remember, this has all been all about just looking at how we are sending our children back to school this time around. So many lessons had to be learned from the previous time that our children opened, but now we do hope to have a smoother transition. This has been Family Check. My name is Jane Momboy. Thank you so much for being with us. Be sure to join us again tomorrow morning. Have a lovely day. God bless. See you tomorrow.